The enemy isn't just at the gates, the enemy is within. Europe is facing multiple fronts in the battle to preserve peace and security for its citizens. The Maltese Presidency of the European Union must balance shifting threats, cascading across a volatile global landscape, while upholding the principal values of the European Union. 1 year after the Brussels bombings, and in the midst of an election cycle conflicted with populist and humanitarian views on migration, the EU's first defence remains effective diplomacy. Malta is working closely with the European External Action Service under the umbrella of the EU's global strategy to manage the complex challenges of migration, terrorism, and the new, increasingly sophisticated threat of hybrid warfare.
This cybersecurity issue is an issue that affects everybody in public life and private life. I think it's very hard to coordinate all the efforts because it is cross-sectoral, it is cross-institutional, and it remains a real challenge. But I think on the European level we definitely need to concentrate ourselves on sensitive infrastructure, because that is something that within a hybrid warfare can easily be targeted.
There is a threat from Russia, Russian aggression, but there is also the threat of destabilization of the EU due to the migration flows that we have seen, especially in 2015, 2016. So I think we face these two major security challenges. One is a more aggressive Russia, the other is the conflict in our nearby areas and the following migrant flows to Europe.
Well, first of all, I think the problem of Russia has got to be faced and solved. It's a problem that is not just a question of Russia being an aggressor. It's a question of both sides being in bad faith. There are historic reasons for that. They should be addressed.
Combating terrorism and organised crime through the EU policy cycle, Malta is enhancing the exchange and management of security-related information. Key to the effective management of Europe's security intelligence is the interoperability of databases used by national law and border management authorities. Malta is also pressing on with the fight against terrorist financing, using legislative files including a political agreement on the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive.
I'm also a bit afraid that we are going to lose sight of the goal of destroying the business model of the human smugglers. We might have too many side goals, so I think we should concentrate on the goal to have a well-regulated and well thought-out migration system in Europe, and not this chaotic scenes that we are seeing now with tragic deaths and a lot of criminal activities in the border regions.
Significant progress has already been achieved on initiatives aimed at better managing the Union's external border, including the establishment of an EU system to register entry and exit of third country nationals, and the creation of an EU travel information authorization system to determine the eligibility of all visa-exempt third country nationals to travel to the Schengen area.
The Maltese government have played in with interesting new ideas, so we will have to wait and see whether there is support for them in the Council, the Commission and in the Parliament here. But I think that we are going to need some sort of a pushback model also in the Mediterranean, as we did with the EU-Turkey deal and the tightening of the border controls in the so-called Balkan route. So I think we need to see a similar solution in the Mediterranean.
To ensure more coordinated criminal justice cooperation across borders, the Maltese Presidency is improving the governance of Eurojust with the aim of better protecting citizens against international criminal activities such as trafficking, terrorism and money laundering.
One concrete step could definitely be to activate the permanent structured cooperation, which is foreseen in the treaty, which hasn't been yet activated.
Of course, there are European values that have got to be respected, but there are problems as well that have got to be addressed in a concrete way, in a progressive way, and also in ways that acknowledge that such burdens can only be faced through more public spending, which is something that governments are reluctant to go into.
At the March EU Foreign Affairs Council, a meeting of foreign and defence ministers, Malta oversaw a unanimous vote strengthening the EU's security and defence operations. The Maltese Presidency led the decision to establish an EU military planning and conduct capability, which will command EU non-executive missions.
6 months ago, we started to work on strengthening our common security and defence in the European Union. Exactly 6 months after that, we have taken today the first operational decisions, and that was done unanimously with a lot of support, thanks to a very constructive and active approach of all member states. And this in one of the fields where traditionally we've had in the history of the European Union more divisive steps. It's since the 50s.
The member states doesn't always necessarily agree about the security challenges. We, for instance, see that in regard to Russia. Some member states have a more lenient position, some have a stronger position. So I don't think we see a really united Europe position on foreign affairs objectives. And there it's always worth to reflect upon whether you want a watered-down common position or you want a harder position that is not shared by all 28 member states. It's always a balance you have to find.
At the same meeting, a civilian-military joint support coordination cell was established. The EU will also move forward to enhance the European Defence Action Plan to support European security and partnership with NATO.
I'm very encouraged by the fact that today we take very important decisions. Only, again, 5-6 months ago this would have been quite impossible to imagine. And this shows that European decision makers have understood that security is a priority for Europeans, for European citizens, and for sure the global environment invites us to take more responsibility, and the way to take more responsibility in defence and security is through the European Union.
That's all for this edition. Next on the Presidency, we take a closer look at how Malta is implementing the Presidency's agenda on social inequality. Thanks for watching.